Hey guys, my name is Justin Billick. I am graduating class of 2024. I'm involved with the ATO fraternity on campus, Mall UN, Ultimate Frisbee, Chamber Orchestra, and a couple other things on campus.
I'm Marissa. I'm a member of the class of 2022. I'm a member of the Delta Zeta sorority. I'm involved with tour guides and Muhlenberg admissions, orientation, and best buddies.
Hi, I'm Lindsay. I'm class of 2023. I'm involved on Panhandle Exec. I'm also a tour guide involved in orientation, best buddies, and Hilo.
So we've recently just raised $17,000 at this point for Momentum. Thank you guys so much for all your support.
Thank you.
Well, welcome, the Office of Multicultural Life. This is our section of the Momentum. I'm excited to welcome back some of the stars of Muhlenberg College, let alone Multicultural Life. And it's so good to see everybody, at least virtually. I am the Director of Multicultural Life. As a matter of fact, guys, my new title is the Associate Dean of Students and Diversity Initiatives. I know, it took a while, but yes. So it was pretty, it was an honor to be recognized by the college community, including, students, faculty, and staff. So that's been really nice. So I would like to go around and just ask you guys to share a little bit about what was your experience at Muhlenberg as in terms of student leaders, what kind of things you did there, and what are you doing now? And I will go around my screen. So I'm gonna start with Ambi first. Ambi, can you share what was your role as a student leader on campus and what is your career now?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Anvi Gadani. I graduated in 2012. I participated quite a bit, I thought, in my opinion, in the Office of Multicultural Life when I was at Muhlenberg. I was, for a period of time, president of the Asian Student Association. I participated in a lot of the Black Student Association meetings and activities. I also was president of a multicultural sorority that was around on campus at the time, called Theta Nu Xi. And, during my time at Muhlenberg, I think that the community of I guess non-Caucasian students has grown. So during my time at Muhlenberg, I feel like there were not as many non-Caucasian students, and so we sort of all would band together with Robin, and I thought that really helped shape my view in terms of how to approach life. It's always challenging when you feel like you're in this smaller sort of community where you feel like you actually sort of belong, and that shapes your views about the world. That helps you understand how to approach when you're meeting people that are different than you. And there's a lot of challenges that come in life when someone doesn't agree with your opinions or views. So trying to understand how to approach that was one of the most important things that being at Muhlenberg taught me. Also, when I was at Muhlenberg, I was a neuroscience major and a minor in public health. I was pre-med, and now I'm a physician. I'm subspecializing in the field of movement disorders, which is a subspecialty of neurology. So I always wanted to go in that direction based on my neuroscience background. I learned a lot from my professors at Muhlenberg, but one of the most important things was doing that public health minor. I think that as a physician, there's a lot of challenges that come in terms of understanding diversity and equity in not just the healthcare field as a physician, as a woman of color physician, but also the patients that you're seeing and how their lives are impacted by the care that you're giving versus the care that another provider with different views might be giving. So there's a lot there to unpack.
Unpack for sure. Thank you for that. DK, can you share a little bit about what your experience was on campus and what you're doing now?
Sure, I can share. So my name is DK. I graduated Muhlenberg class of 2020, and I study business. And I'm currently applying at Amazon right now. I'm a manager at a fulfillment center. And my day-to-day tasks include like doing everything it takes to get your package to your house. How many of you here are Prime members?
I am.
So I'm behind the scenes of that and just like working to get your package to your door if you want it within 1 day or 2 days. And then during my college years, I had the privilege of working at Amazon over the summers. So I already had the opportunity to see what it was like to work as what we call an associate, which is our entry level workers. So during my time at Muhlenberg, I was very involved with the community. It all started with the Emerging Leaders Program, and I would say that gave me my first sight of family at Muhlenberg. And it all started with Robin Riley. I remember when I first came, like I was 17 at the time, and I didn't fill out some of my forms, and they wouldn't let me move in unless I went to CVS and I got a physical. So it was interesting doing that. And Robin was very supportive at the time. So when I think of Muhlenberg and I think of Robin, she was like my mother in a sense, you know, and I'm really grateful for her. But at Muhlenberg, I was also very involved with the Office of Community Engagement. And I spent a lot of my time like volunteering at local elementary schools. And I would say every Friday I would go to one of the local elementary schools and just volunteer in the classroom. That was something I really appreciated and admired. And then I also got a few of my friends to join in as well. And then there were times when I also interned with the Office of Admissions. And I would spend like times I hosted new students and just telling them about what campus life is like. What were some of the other questions we had to ask? I forgot.
I think you answered them all, so thank you for that. There's more to come. Chris,
Okay.
tell me more about what your experience was like here at Muhlenberg and what you're doing now.
Yeah, thank you so much, Robin. Hi, I'm Chris. I graduated class of 2019, studying political economy and public policy at Muhlenberg. And currently I am a community advocate with Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Asian Law Caucus on their voting rights team, based in San Francisco. So my day-to-day involves a wide plethora of policy advocacy. I work on the voting rights team to address different policy areas for local democracy work or voting rights that could be related to our local elections, language access. More recent projects have been the 2020 census and also state and local redistricting. Really just generally a community organizer or community advocate, wanting to relate to people, relate to marginalized communities across the state of California. And I really think that my time as an organizer, specifically for API communities, was really started at Muhlenberg, was started being part of ASA. Similar to Anvi, I was also president of ASA for a short time during my years at Muhlenberg. And I think also similar to DK, I have just so much gratitude and so much love for the role that the Office of Multicultural Life has played in helping our Asian Students Association really connect with outside conferences, outside programming. I remember one year Robin drove us, must have been like five hours to a conference in Cornell, like right after a nor'easter. I'm just a little aside, I'm just really thankful for you, Robin. Like, I think your commitment to the Office of Multiculti like shows your care and love for students. And I think it's obvious across like the multiple stories that we have here. I think in terms of my involvement with Multiculti, I again was president of ASA for a couple years. I was on the Multicultural Life Leadership Council. I also, similar to DK, I worked as part of our admissions office, welcoming new students. I really wanted to make sure that people of color, that marginalized communities really felt welcome here at Muhlenberg, or at least be part of moving the needle to help students feel more accepted. I also was part of the Sedahi Diversity Project the summer after my freshman year, which I think really set the scene for thinking about diversity and inclusion work, who is in the room, who isn't, and definitely plays to the work that I do today. So thank you so much.
You guys are making me so proud. I don't even know what to say. This is what a great opportunity to come back together and kind of reminisce. I remember that Northeaster, I couldn't figure out how to use the windshield wipers. We had all kinds of on AA. It was horrible, but we made it there. And I'm glad for that. But I wanted to ask you guys to think a little bit about when you were on campus, given all the things that you were part of in your leadership roles and your participation in welcoming students and making sure that the administration was aware of the needs of marginalized communities. What activities or programs do you remember or believe that were really instrumental to beginning to understand what it really means to build an inclusive environment or community? And it's so interesting because over the span of time, things have changed so much from when Ambi graduated until when DK graduated. So I really can't remember exactly what was at your disposal at that time. But if you can remember any programs or events that really seem to sort of crystallize in your mind, that sort of kind of really think about what inclusion looks like or could look like if we strategize in this way. The Multicultural Council was one way. As Ambi said, when she was a student here, the council was tighter knit because I think the populations were smaller. And by the time you got to DK's class, the community had grown to quite a bit. It's still small comparatively, but it's a lot larger than it was when Ambi was a student. So if you could think of any of those things and share that, I would appreciate it.
Robin, for me, I forgot the name of the initiative, but I remember it was, so we would come back early in like the spring semester and we'll go on like a retreat. Forgot the name of that.
AJL, the social justice retreat.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of just bringing like inclusion to my mind, I was a great opportunity because like everyone's there and you're not focused on like homework or anything, and you're just talking about inclusion and what it means to like make people feel wanted in certain areas. And I don't know if the school still does that because of COVID, but I think it's a great initiative.
We just got back on the weekend this week. We just got back this weekend from the AJL retreat.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and then I had the opportunity, I think I went 2 or 3 times, and every year that I went, even though there were some like things that were familiar, it was a great opportunity. I always felt like I was learning something new each and every time.
Thank you. Anybody else can think of something?
I remember when I was there, there were a lot of collaborative events because like you said, you know, as a tighter knit community, we like the ASA, the BSA, and Theta Nu Xi would all collaborate on multiple events. We did a couple of, you know, step shows. I remember doing that. I remember doing a fashion show that sort of incorporated like modern fashion, Indian fashion, traditional like East Asian fashion. It was really cool, and I think that's how we sort of got the student body together in like a fun way to teach and learn about other cultures and other groups. There was something that maybe wasn't as happy. I don't know if you recall, Robin, but there was a student on our campus that, you know, was walking on campus property one evening and was stopped by the campus police and sort of interrogated, and it definitely brought a more somber sort of feeling to our community for sure. But I remember the response from the administration and them holding a whole student body forum in the dining hall with President Helm, and we all just, the entire student body that wanted to be there, just sat down and had a conversation about it. And that I thought was also something that was really important. And I think, you know, in our individual classes, often there were, you know, there's a lot of professors at Muhlenberg that, you know, since we go to a liberal arts college, it's important to have these discussions when these current events are happening. And I remember a lot of my professors, even though, you know, many of them were science professors, would sit us down if something major had happened in the world and say, hey, today we're going to put aside our coursework and we're going to talk about this that happened and how you guys are processing it, how you're feeling about it. And that it's also important, certainly in the individual classroom, but as I was saying, that large student body forum was really important. Certainly tough to do now because of the pandemic, but
yeah,
you know.
You're right. We do have some amazing faculty members who still today will make that space available to students to sort of, you know, share what they're feeling and what they're experiencing. And I think in that way, I've always felt pretty comfortable that multicultural life doesn't just exist in the building. Wherever you guys are, it exists, right? Students who are actually doing the work, and so they take that into their classrooms and on the stage, and you know, on the football field or wherever it may be. And that has always given me a lot of hope that as a collective, as a community, we will be somehow, some way sharing this knowledge with others who may not ever come through the Office of Multicultural Life or community engagement or admissions after they, you know, matriculate. But because of the leaders of the community, that information still is shared. Chris, do you have an example of something perhaps?
Yeah, and I definitely also wanted to echo everything else that's been shared. I think back about like the town halls that happened during our time, especially during just this Trump presidency era, this like Black Lives Matter atmosphere during my time at Muhlenberg. I think very similar to Anvi, appreciating the space that Muhlenberg was able to give students, but I think also very, very thankful and wanting to recognize the emotional labor that comes from individual faculty faculty members of color. And I really am thankful about the Office of Multiculti giving me the tools, I think, to learn how to facilitate across those spaces, to feel as though I was gaining like the knowledge of how to make campus accessible through my everyday interactions. And one example, I think actually, I took a class with Robin. I was part of the intergroup dialogue series that we did. And really reflecting on how the skills that we learned in that class, being able to really listen and empathize with each other, and be able to hold multiple truths at once and to communicate across a diverse group of people. I think that's been the building blocks of how I've taken like my professional experience, like being able to facilitate like a Zoom space or a physical space, and wanting to make sure that the most marginalized of our communities, the most marginalized of the room are always felt like they're heard, and that their needs are being met. I think a lot about how Multiculti was definitely a space for marginalized communities, for people of color. I think there was a turning point along my time at Muhlenberg where there was a lot of joy to be found in the Multicultural Center, because they were meeting spaces for our Asian Students Association to have hot pot nights. I think, very, very proud of just the exec board at the time when I was on ASA, but really wanting to use our budget or just our platform as a student org to be able to educate folks on the different traditions of like East and Southeast Asian culture, I remember that we did collaborate with Top Notch a couple times as well to really think about what does it mean to unpack the differences of like South Asian culture with like East Asian culture. I remember we held our first, or honestly, maybe not even our first intergenerational knowledge is so difficult with student orgs, but I remember we held Asian Pacific American Heritage Month in May one year. All of the Lunar New Year celebrations that we had planned together. Yeah, just very thankful for the Office of Multicultural to be able to help facilitate us through that growth and to see that leadership grow across different students who were on the exec board for the years that I was there.
It's so interesting when people would say, you know, how the office sort of supports those kinds of efforts in terms of maturation, development of skills, because I always seem to meet students who are already leaders in their own right, and they come in and they're just looking for maybe logistical kinds of information, or who should I speak to, you know, what the resources are on campus or off campus or whatever. And I always see, you know, students from my vantage point, it's really just letting them know that they are already leaders. They already have insights about, you know, the things that they're experiencing that don't feel like they're connecting with the rest of the community, or things that they want to see, you know, all the things that, you know, Ami had talked about. I totally forgot about the fashion shows and those kinds of, it's joyful to really celebrate how rich we are in terms of diversity, ethnicity, and race, and gender, and sexuality, and on and on and on. I met a young man who was Hindu the other day, and just like, I was like, oh my God, I just love you. Just tell me everything, because there's so much that we don't get a chance to get to know people that way. And if we do, then it just really makes our community so much stronger and more beautiful when we can actually acknowledge and celebrate the Lunar New Year's huge, you know, here, Top Notch, and, you know, their performances. You know, we're getting to go to Black History Month soon. And then of course, Women's History Month as well. And then our Muslim students are growing. So it's just that kind of community that we gotta have the best of and not always the best of both worlds, in that we have to work for justice, equity, but at the same time, our cultures are so rich that everybody wants to be a part of it. So it's like, you know, it's always a celebration possible. And so I'm really happy that the students I've had a chance to work with throughout the years have something about them already wants to build a better world, a better community. And so all I have to do is just be there to support them. So it's easy for me in a lot of ways. So yeah. So I think one of the questions they really want me to ask you guys is, after you've left Muhlenberg and you either went on to graduate study, medical school, became organized, working in business, did you experience this sort of, I've done all this sort of thinking critically about social justice, right, as an undergrad. But as I move into my career and my young adulthood, that kind of takes a back seat to all the other things I need to focus on, whether that's bills, paying back your student loans, relationships, you know, going on to school, you know, family, those kinds of things. Did you notice that there was sort of a difference between when you can steep yourself as an undergrad in social justice and community building versus when you move on to your career? And what did that sort of juxtaposition feel like from undergrad to life outside of Muhlenberg? And anybody can start, it's fine.
I definitely felt that way. And I remember, like, you know, starting medical school, I was so nervous. And I just wanted to make sure that I did well and focused, because, you know, this was something that I was really passionate about. And I wanted to be a physician because, you know, I wanted to help people, but I wanted to use my science background to help people. And I was the first person in my family to become a physician. So I wanted to make everybody proud. So I remember, actually, there was this moment, and it's interesting you this question, because I remember thinking when I was in like anatomy class, and I was like, you know, I did all this in Muhlenberg. I learned so much. I feel like I grew so much as a person. And here I am just, trying to memorize like all the different parts of the heart,
Important
what
stuff.
use was that?
Important
Right. But at that time, in that moment, it just felt like, where did all this knowledge, like, what am I going to do with all this knowledge? And then, funny enough, it must have been like maybe a week or two later, there was a conversation I was having with someone from Muhlenberg who was just a year below me, a sorority sister of mine, and another person from Muhlenberg with a differing opinion was commented on the post. It was on Facebook, so it was like a public post. And this person was also of like a science background, and it was I don't remember the details, but the conversation was something about inequality and of how patients are treated in the healthcare field. And I pointed out to them and I said, like, you're a person of science, and I can show you studies that have been done that show that patients who are a lower socioeconomic background, patients who are of color, patients who don't meet heteronormative standards, they very often get treated less or lesser than their other counterparts. And it was alarming to me that this person wouldn't sort of realize that there are these studies out there. And that's when I was like, this is it. This is where the knowledge comes in, and this is what everything I learned at Muhlenberg is gonna help me achieve, not only now as a medical student but also as a physician. And I hope that was when I was like, I hope that as a physician that I can also put aside my own biases and continue to, look within myself and make sure that I'm treating patients equally and I'm treating my colleagues around me equally.
I'm so happy for your son. He has a great mommy. One day he'll be able to say the same. That makes me really happy.
It's all thanks to you, Robin.
Oh, stop it. What else? Does anybody else have any thoughts about that? Did you experience that? I was just thinking about you, Chris, because your work seems like a continuation of a lot of the things that you did on campus. You know that Chris did so much. ASA, I remember when it was like the e-board. It was like Omni and the other people, leaders on the e-board, right? And I remember, I believe it was Tina Chu that started us going to the first the retreat, the conference that for Asian students. And she came back, and I remember her coming back and said, we're going to have this whole sort of campaign, like just because I'm Asian doesn't mean I'm in the sciences or play the violin. And she was just so like pumped up and radicalized, like, oh my God, what's happening to ASA? And it was so interesting because it was still a small group, but the awareness and the consciousness around Asian concerns was just starting to really take, I think, really become really prevalent on our campus. And Ambi, since you've been gone, ASA has grown. At one time, our global, our international community, our Chinese students, really just took ASA out of the water because it was like, maybe 10, 15 students on a regular basis, but then you had another 30, from international communities. But I would say that Chris continued that radical sort of perspective that infused ASA. So, and now that you're working as a community organizer, it just seems like a kind of a continuation. What do you think about what you experienced in your role here on campus and what you're doing now?
Yeah, I think this question is multifaceted, because I think honestly, definitely prioritizing my degree and prioritizing my schoolwork. I think it got to a point during my time at Muhlenberg, probably my junior or my senior year, where I realized how passionate I was about wanting to devote my time towards being a full-time organizer, or thinking about the work that I was doing with the Asian Students Association, the work that I was doing with the East Coast Asian American Student Union, thinking about how that could translate to being a full-time job. And I think while I appreciate the vigor that I had as a student, I think sitting with a couple truths after graduating, or maybe just letting them simmer and letting them sit as I continue to develop my theory of change. I think part of me is grounded in the idea that our value to job titles and our value to specific organizations or our employment status is not a reflection of our worth, and not a reflection of the care that we give into community. I think very prevalent across like my nonprofit specifically is the real change is not going to come in the 9 to 5. I'm very grounded in the idea that me being paid a full-time job is not going to fix the world. The real work comes from the emotional labor that we give to our community and the emotional care that we give to each other, whether that be during work hours or off. And so first, wanting to set the tone of I have a tremendous amount of respect for organizers and for community advocates, but I don't want to be creating this idea that it's something that like creates like a hierarchy of roles. I think every single I think there's always work to be done in every aspect. But definitely reflective on how being in this position is definitely something that I love. It's being able to connect with people. It's an extension of my time as a community organizer or student organizer in college. It's being able to reach out to local Korean communities, local Vietnamese communities in the Bay Area, and be able to ask them, what are your thoughts on state policy? What are your thoughts in regards to this? How can we support you? How can we be imaginative of a better future? And I think that it really stems from thinking about the 3% Asian population during my time at Muhlenberg, wanting to go around and asking folks, what would you want to see from student government? What would you want to see from the administration? Did you know that there's a budget for us to go to conferences? Did you know that there's a budget for us to have food for like Multiculti or like in the Multicultural Center? So really wanting to be able to create those connections. Definitely some development along the way. I don't know how much longer I'm actually going to stay as an organizer, but very thankful for, again, very thankful for my time at Muhlenberg being able to empower me during this time after graduation, and hoping that this grounds me for whatever grad school, whatever next steps might look like for me.
It's fabulous. You did know that we did have our first Asian woman SGA president. I'm trying to think of her name. I want to say 2 years ago. And what was really interesting about it was I didn't even know, because I don't follow SGA, that she was president. I thought, oh my God, it's the first one. Are you kidding me? We don't know about this.
Oh, Robin, you're talking about Stephanie Yang?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
She's amazing.
Yes. And she didn't get her flowers while she was here. And she worked really hard to diversify SGA and the D&I committee on SGA. And so I got to know her in her last year, her senior year, second semester, but an amazing young woman. So it's been a really interesting few years for sure. But she took SGA to another level. So really happy to hear that. DK, what about you?
Wait, can we revisit that question?
Sure. So when you were a student here, you had opportunities to talk about building community and working in community with Office of Community Engagement. You also were kind of steeped in conversation around inclusion. But now that you left the college and you've gone on to your career, have you found that you kind of don't have that kind of intentional space set aside for that kind of work? Or have you, like Amvi, there's moments when you're able to pull out what you know about diversity, equity, inclusion, and you can bring it to your work?
Yeah, I can definitely say that in my perspective, there are moments where I can bring it out as needed, but it is something that's always on my mind. I would say at Amazon, one thing that we struggle with is that when you look at the people working at the associate level, which we call our entry level positions, it's a lot of people of color. But then as you move towards like the leadership position, it's a lot of white males, to be quite frank. And then for me as a person of color, and especially as a Black male in a leadership position, I always have it on my mind to have the ideas of like inclusion. For example, we'll have some Hispanic associates that don't speak any English at all. And the first thing that's on my mind is always making sure to get them towards the right resources so they know how to like navigate everything within the company. And another thing too is that as a Black male in a company like Amazon, I'm always looking to create more career developmental opportunities for other people so that they can get to the same level as I am. And then I would say, looking back at my work at Muhlenberg, I always thought that representation really matters, which was one of the reasons why I spent a lot of my time working at elementary schools, because when the young students of color see someone like me doing so well, that motivates them that they can also be in that position. So I'm always looking to open doors for others as well.
I'm going to kind of lead us to this last thing for you guys to share a little bit about what would you like multicultural life students to know about us, what you're doing, and sort of like words of wisdom, and also our majority students, because I know that, Amvi, DK, and Chris, we've always tried to find ways to build allyships and connections across multiple communities. That's not just about people of color, it's about all of us, right? And so I think that particularly today in this age, there's a lot of discord, and a division amongst a multitude of communities. And we also have, with the violence against Asian community members over the last, an uptick of it in the last few years has caused a lot of harm, not only in the Asian community, but between communities as well. And we have a lot of work to do, right, to address that. But regardless of that, I think that we look to those moments when we do come together. And you guys don't know this, but we did have a Theta Nu Xi. We did speak to that, which was a multicultural sorority on campus. It was a beautiful experience, and so sad that it didn't continue. But when we come together across communities, it really is an example of what's possible. This kind of dreaming for something more, something better than what we have currently. And but if you could offer any words of affirmation or wisdom for our communities, I would love to hear that. I mean, you're the elder, so you could go first.
I actually was gonna say something. Thanks for calling me the elder. But no, yeah, I was gonna say that I think Chris and DK already sort of echoed this, but there's always work to be done, to take Chris's words. And what you learn as you're going through, your Muhlenberg education, and as you're going through your liberal arts education, it follows you, even though you may not realize it in the moment when you're graduating, or even like a year from then. When you're in that sort of experience, or that moment where, something catches you, or you realize that, this is not right, then you realize that education has stuck with you. And, just giving few examples, like I'm often educating patients that I'm not an assistant. I'm not a nurse, although nurses do amazing jobs. I am a physician. I'm often educating patients that I, yes, was born in India, don't have an accent because I'm immigrated to the US when I was very young. And yes, I am a citizen of the US, you know, but I think one of the most important things that you learn is patience and professionalism. And I think that goes across all fields of study at Muhlenberg and across all populations of students. So, you know, when you are graduating and when you're starting to apply that into your career or into your postgraduate studies, I think that is what really, really stuck with me, is that, you know, I learned to be this professional, composed individual, and I learned how to communicate effectively about myself, about diversity, about equality, and yeah, come back to me.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any words of wisdom?
I would say a word of wisdom I have, especially when it comes to deciding a major when you're in college, is just because you're in a field where you don't see a lot of other students that look like you, doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue it because you feel like you're not going to do well. I remember during my time at Muhlenberg, I would say it was only me and another student. Robin, you remember Cameron, right?
Yes.
We were the only two Black students in the Muhlenberg business program during my time there.
Yeah.
For my class of 2020.
Yeah.
There was probably a few, like one or two from the football team.
Mhm.
But I would say like there were times where when you're sitting in the classroom with like all the white students, it feels discouraging because
Mhm.
when you look around, you don't see people that look like you, they can't relate to you, but you shouldn't give up because once you're able to make it through and get your degree, now you're someone that students come in after you can look at as a role model. So I would say in any field, not just business, like if you're that I'm not saying that I'm a trailblazer, but if you're that one person, you should definitely think of the people coming after you because seeing you succeed will help motivate them.
Thank you. Thank you. Chris?
Wow, if I could give advice to any student in my situation, or just students in general now, I might try to round us out and say to take care of yourself, that you deserve the space that you are taking, and to really focus on your mental health, focus on you, and I think there's an expectation that we need to carry ourselves in a certain way, or there's expectations or microaggressions of what is expected of us, and really wanting students nowadays to be authentically themselves, and to be really asking what is important and how am I prioritizing me in the moment. I think that's what I'd say.
Okay, I'm gonna give this big heart. If I could spread it around the room, I would. You guys really make me proud. I'm so happy for you. I'm so happy for all the people that you're coming in contact with. You will always have a piece of me, and I hope you carry with me fondly, carry with me with you fondly. And I would also say that you're always welcome home. Hopefully we'll get through this COVID and we can actually be in each other's presence sometime in the near future. I will stay in touch. I'll be watching you on Facebook. I'm trying to get on the Instagram. It's not one of my favorite places, but I try to get on there every once in a while. But it has really been a pleasure to see everybody and just to know you guys are doing well. If there's anything that we could ever do to be able to support, you know, I'm here at least for a little while longer. Please feel free to reach out to me. But thank you so much for heeding the call and the emails and agreeing to be a part of this panel with me. I really appreciate it.